name's Jenna and today I'm going to be telling you all the reasons why you should pretend the Artemis Fowl movie doesn't exist. This is going to be chock full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film but you do want to put yourself through that torture, then I do recommend you go and you watch the film on Disney Plus before watching this video. However, if you want to save yourself the hassle and, you know, pretend the movie doesn't exist, then feel free to stick around to find out why. So I read Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer back in early primary school maybe. I'm positive I was still in primary school when I first read the series Artemis Fowl, and I loved it. You know, it was great. It was this 12-year-old criminal mastermind, so already my love for villains was, you know, at its peak when I was younger. So we had this 12-year-old criminal mastermind who was the main character of these novels, and he kidnapped a fairy, then the fairies were working with him and they were trying to do all this criminal mastermindy stuff, and as the books were going on he was developing a bit of a conscience and he was realizing that maybe it's worth being kind to people even if you don't get a reward for it. And it was great. We got to see this amazing character development. Everything about it was so good. The plot was so much fun. All the secondary characters were fantastic. Everything about the books was great. Then we found out that there was going to be a movie and Disney had picked it up and it went through development hell. I think the book got picked up, got optioned for a film back in 2006 or something ridiculous. So it has been through development hell. And finally we got a film, and the first trailer, well, even back when the casting first came out, so the casting was coming out and we were, you know, we've got unknowns for Artemis and Holly, which was fine, although I always pictured Holly as an adult because she's 84 in the book because she's a fairy. So I always pictured her as an adult, not a kid. So the fact that her actress is a kid, really, I struggled. Then we got Judi Dench as Commander Root, and again, I struggled because that takes away a huge part of Holly's story, but we'll get there. And the rest was whatever. I didn't care about the rest of the cast. And then we got the teaser trailer and we watched it and we went, I don't know. And then the actual trailer came out and that's when I went, oh. Alright then, I'll give it a go. So the film was originally meant to be released in cinemas, and then the Fox Disney merger meant it got pushed back, and then coronavirus meant it got pushed back again, so Disney eventually just went, you know, screw it, we'll dump it on Disney Plus. That was the best decision Disney ever made, because this movie's not gonna make any money at all. If they'd put this movie in the cinema, it would have been a complete box office disappointment. I can just see it now. So you know what, let's be nice and let's talk about the positives of this film, because believe it or not, there are some, and we do have to, you know, be nice. So I have 3 positives for the movie, only 3. The first positive is the score. The score is really, really beautiful and I absolutely loved it. Sort of sounded like they'd meshed in some Irish mythology into it, so we got some Irish folk music, and it really did enhance the Irishness of the tale and the fairy tale-ness of it. So the score was gorgeous. Positive number 2 is Ireland is beautiful, and I'm so glad they filmed there because they would never have been able to replicate that anywhere else. Ireland is gorgeous. So there's that. And then the third good thing is Colin Farrell's in the movie. He doesn't need to be in the movie, don't get me wrong, his character's pretty much pointless and he's not in the book if I remember correctly, but it's Colin Farrell and I love him, so it's fine to just stare at him. Anyway, those are my 3 positives, and now we move on to the negatives and the reason why you should pretend this movie doesn't exist. And the negatives are everything else. So not only was this a bad book to movie adaptation, it was just a bad movie. Think of the worst, most generic children's fantasy film you've ever seen. It was worse than that. So I'm not convinced anyone in the production actually bothered to read the book before making the movie. Because apart from some character names and a generalized plot, nothing else is anything like the books. The main actor, he's a newcomer and his acting wasn't great. It was very stale. He sounded like he had the fakest Irish accent ever, and I'm pretty sure the actor is Irish, so not sure what happened there, but every time he opened his mouth I was like, ooh. Pretty much anytime anyone in this movie opened their mouth I was like, ooh, stop talking. This movie would be better if none of y'all were talking. So this this movie. It starts off with like all these news clips and Mulch, and then Mulch is taken to like this secure facility, and then he narrates the entire film. Like there is an obnoxious amount of narration happening in this movie. It's like we couldn't see a single scene without Mulch suddenly narrating it. So we had that to look forward to, and that was Josh Gad did something real weird to his voice so he could be Mulch, and it just sounded wrong and dumb. And for some reason, this like little bit of interrogation was always in black and white or like a grayscale, and it made no sense. I was like, why is this a color scheme? So that was that. And so then we spend the next like little part of the film being introduced to all of the characters. So we're introduced to Artemis, who is about as opposite from Book Artemis as he can possibly be. Book Artemis is a 12-year-old criminal mastermind who wears suits. He doesn't wear normal clothes, but he definitely doesn't use a skateboard, definitely doesn't go surfing on the ocean. All things that movie Artemis decided to do from like the very opening scene. I just sat there and went, oh no, 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 this is bad. So we're introduced there. We're introduced to Butler, who doesn't go by Butler in the movie. I was trying to remember this because in the film they made this really big deal about Butler doesn't go by Butler. He only goes by his first name. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I've read all of the books and I'm not even sure I could tell you what his first name is. I'm positive he goes by Butler in the books. So I'm not sure why that happened. Like I looked up his Wikipedia entry. His Wikipedia entry is like called Butler. So I was kind of like, okay. We're introduced to Artemis's dad, who I'm positive is not in the first book. Positive he's already gone missing or he's presumed dead in the first book, and that they don't find out he's alive until the second, the Arctic incident, which I think they like combined the two, but I'm not entirely sure because it didn't seem like there was enough plot for one movie, let alone two. So we're introduced to them, and then we're sent below ground into the core and we're introduced to Holly, which I will admit, the actual like setting and the visuals of the fairy center of the earth city, I guess, it did look really cool, and I'll admit that I was really impressed by that. And then we are introduced to Holly, and first of all I was like, whoa, you look so young. Are you meant to be that young? I don't recall you being that young. So there was that. And then we're introduced to Commander Root, who is Judi Dench, is a female, and for anyone who has read the book, you will know that Holly is the first female captain ever in the Leprechauns. And well, Leprechaun, it's something like that. I think it's Leprechaun. Yes. And to have Commander Root be a female completely undermines the point of Holly's story. Holly's story was so fantastic because she fought her way up the ranks to become the first ever female captain, and to really show, you know, female empowerment, to get those females, they push through, they get the job done. And she was doing this while she was just being berated for being a girl. And I don't know if maybe it's because the books were written, back in the early 2000s, everyone's like, no, we can't show a woman struggling. No, Holly's story is fantastic and is fundamental. It is one of the reasons why I love strong female characters so much. Commander Root completely undermines all of that by being a female. So that was one thing that the movie just took Holly's legacy and just stomped all over it. We're introduced to Mulch properly, and he is, to be fair, he's pretty much how I pictured him from the books. He's probably the only casting that I was relatively impressed with. We're introduced to Foley, who is a centaur, and he's really into like sciencey gadgety stuff, but you wouldn't really know it from the movie because we spend about 5 minutes with him. And then we're introduced to Juliet, who is in the books, she's Butler's younger sister, and in the movie she's Butler's niece. Also thought she was meant to be older than she looked, and in the movie she was completely pointless. She was just there to scream and be in the way. So that's all of the characters that we're introduced to, and if we are introduced to all of them so quickly and not really given time to care about any of them. So I spent the entire movie just going, I know you all have names and I know that I know them and I know who you are from the books, but if I hadn't read the books, I would have been so lost and like, why do I care about any of these people? Like, what is happening? I haven't read past Artemis Fowl in a very long time. So I reread Artemis Fowl last year? Yeah, last year. But the villain isn't in Artemis Fowl. The villain, who we are introduced to in this film as a faceless personal black. I do know it's a she because I ended up going and looking up who she was. She doesn't get introduced until the Arctic incident because the first book, Artemis Fowl is the villain. He is the bad guy in the first book. But oh no, he can't be the bad guy in the film because that's not okay. So they turn this awesome book, which is about a villain, and just turn it into a movie about another typical teenage boy protagonist that no one cares about. That was one of the most compelling things about this novel, is that Artemis Fowl was the villain and we were reading from his point of view. And while we sympathize with Holly, we kind of wanted Artemis to win. So that is the biggest thing, the biggest issue, and why you should pretend that the movie doesn't exist, because the movie completely misses the point of the book, which is that Artemis is a bad guy. So the entire film felt like, oh my. Alright, my battery's gonna die and it's raining, so we're just gonna go with this. So, the rain understands how I feel about this movie. The movie didn't really have a story either, so it actually felt just like the first act of a film. It felt like we only got to see 30 minutes stretched out into an hour and a half, because while his dad does get kidnapped and he's all about finding his dad and, you know, bringing him home, and he does succeed in that, which is so dumb, and I don't know how he does it because it doesn't make any sense. The rest of the film could have taken place in like 20 minutes. Instead, it doesn't, and I'm not sure how they buffed the runtime out like they did, because nothing actually happens in the film. Those are my big concerns. So the biggest reasons why you should just pretend this movie doesn't exist. Number one, Artemis Fowl is not the villain in the film. And yes, he's not the villain as such in the books either, but he is definitely an anti-hero, antagonist kind of character who, as the series goes on and he grows a little bit older and he learns more through Holly about the world, he becomes a kinder and a nicer person who eventually realizes that it is better to be kind without a reward than to be unkind and get a reward. So that is the character development that we see throughout this series, and Disney just completely shat on all of that by having him be the protagonist first up, because the driving force for him in this first film is to find his dad. In the first book, his driving force is he wants a fairy. He wants to kidnap a fairy. That's what he wants to do, because he's just that kind of a kid. So they ruined his character completely and just made him completely pointless. They kind of ruined Butler just because I can't get over the fact that they wanted to call him his first name. Like, what is that? Artemis's mum is dead in the film, and I was like, I thought it was a pretty big deal that she was still alive, because later on she like comes out of her coma thing. And then second is Holly Shaw, and they completely undermined her story and gave her a shit one in return. And so she was also kind of pointless. The whole film was kind of pointless. We never actually figured out who the villain was, because the villain sort of showed up and was like, yes, Artemis, I have kidnapped your father and you will bring me the Aculon if you ever want to see him again. And Artemis is like, cool, I'm just gonna kidnap a fairy, I'm gonna get the Aculon, and then I'm gonna use it to get my dad back, sorted. Then he rings her at the end and he's like, oh, you'll never find me. Well, I'm coming to find you, bitch, is basically how that conversation went. And I'm sitting there going, Disney, you thought you were getting a sequel out of this? No. So, I think the Artemis Fowl film can teach us a few things about book to movie adaptations. Number one, book to movie adaptations, don't do them. I know we all complain because Hollywood's running out of ideas and we want book to movie adaptations, and then we get one that pretty much, in my eyes, it knocked Percy Jackson and Eragon off the worst book to movie adaptations pedestal and has put itself up there instead, because it's that bad. At least the Percy Jackson films, right? If you haven't read the books, because my sister has not read the books and she quite enjoys the films, because the films, while they're not the best book to movie adaptation, as a movie they still work. Let me know in the comment section below if you don't get what I'm saying and I'll try to explain it better, but at least Percy Jackson, if you had no idea about the books, you were just coming into it fresh and you were just watching a movie, you would still be able to enjoy yourself, because it is still a full movie which has character arcs, beginning, middle, end. It has everything that you need to be a successful film. It just wasn't a very successful book to movie adaptation. Artemis Fowl, on the other hand, failed as a book to movie adaptation and failed as a movie. It did not have great character arcs. There was not really a beginning, middle, and end. There was just a beginning and a little bit of middle, but there was no actual end. It was basically like a, this is part one, part two will be out later, kids, except there will never be a part two because the film is so shit. And yeah, that's sort of how I would explain it. So, in conclusion, with all of my ranting that I do hope makes sense, don't watch it. Do yourselves a favor and watch something else. Or if you really do want like to hurt yourself, then watch it. Because yes, Ireland is beautiful. The score is actually really nice. I would recommend like looking up and listening to the score because the score is really good. But the rest of the film, just, you don't get attached to any of the characters because you're not given any incentive to get attached to them. Even Artemis Fowl in the book, you're kind of on Artemis's side, even though he's a bad guy, but we're not even on his. Okay, my camera battery actually did die, so I'm not entirely sure where I was up to. But basically, not a good book to movie adaptation, not a good movie in general. Just everything about it was utterly disappointing, and I'm just gonna go reread the books instead. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below if you have watched Artemis Fowl, or if you are going to after my beautiful, you know, positive review, because I would really love to know. If you like this video, be sure to give it a huge thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing. Stay random. Bye.